so that we don't um so we'll just start with rounds of introduction. I know the fellows might have read about SAD in our handbook, and of course, SAD might have read about them as well in the communique recent. But it would still be good to have, that round of introduction from yourself again, so we can hear from everyone. Just like SAD knows, we are the steering committee, myself, Dr. Carpenter, and Dr. Lacombs. And, we've been doing this for 4 years now. And it's good seeing the progression of, fellows from cohort one to cohort two to three to four to five. And now we're in cohort six. So I'll just allow the fellows to introduce themselves. Then, SAD, you can go on to introduce yourself as well. So we'll start with Paula, then Abiola while the rest joins.
Okay, thank you, Sabath. Good afternoon. Hi, Sad. And I think the other fellow isn't here yet, but I'm Dr. Paula Acevedo. I'm a clinical pharmacist, specifically in the outpatient ambulatory care setting. I work at a federally qualified health center in Washington, D.C. as their Director of Clinical Pharmacy Services and Population Health. And I've been there for 9 years. It feels like a long time. And my podcast is going to be centered around uh, discussions around the systemic issues and barriers that are imposed on our patients that affect their diabetes and chronic disease outcomes. Thank you. And great to meet you.
Great. Thank you, Paula. Abiola.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Sir. My name is Abiola Ayodele, and I'm a former journalist, but I pivoted into public health, and I'm focusing on environmental health and safety. So my podcast will be focusing on human-centered workplace health and safety. It's nice to have you here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Abiola. Over to you, Sad.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and hi, Dr. Paula and Abiola. Really nice to meet you and really nice to hear about your podcast topics and what you've been doing. So, my name's Saad, and I'm also a former journalist. And then I started working on public health programs and sustainability programs, doing communications for them. And I was a part of the cohort in 2024. And my podcast was on maternal and child health. So I'd worked on a maternal and child health project. And based on my learnings from that and what I wanted to explore more during in that project, I started a podcast. And it was a really interesting experience. So thank you to BCPH for that. Thank you.
Can we still listen in on your podcast? Is that available?
Yes, it is there. I can
Awesome.
even probably share a link.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely still available. Probably, Sad, you could, tell us a bit about, what you've done between when you were a fellow and now, like some of, your journey through, journalism, then, pivoting to public health and all. Yeah, just briefly.
Yeah, so my journey, I mean, physically has been all over the place, but also in terms of since the podcast, I've also been working on like other projects, other communications projects, a lot of intersections around like water security and health. So I'd been working in the south of India with this water management organization, and they looked at different facets where water intersected with land sustainability, public health, in terms of agricultural markets, food availability, food security. So that's largely been my thrust, but I've also been writing for publications on a range of topics, including on public health. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Sad. We have Josephina joining us. So Josephina, we are just starting and we are just doing rounds of introduction. If you could go ahead to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your thought leadership. Yeah,
Um, oh yes. Hi, I'm Justina. It's so nice to meet you. Um, and thanks for waiting for a couple of minutes. I was just having some issues logging in, but I'm really excited to be here and to hear from you today. And I'm working in community health in Boston in the US. and particularly interested in community-based models of care, especially for youth mental health, um, and mental health disparities across Boston. So that's kind of my focus and the area that I'm hoping to explore in my podcast.
All right, great. Thank you. I think we can go ahead. Um, so yeah, we have about 1 hour, 30 minutes to have this discussion. Just like we learned yesterday during the content development section that Dr. Candice took, we're just here to hear from those of us that were part of the fellowship. We're supposed to be 3 year, Sadie and Buffy. I think they're having technical issues to join, but whenever they join, I'm very sure they can join in the conversation. So we just wanted to know from their own perspective some of the things they did, from planning, logistics, and to execution and even promotions. So some of those things that Candy talked about, will bounce it off, to hear from the experiences of Sad that is here, and Buffy and Sade when they join us. So I'm speaking for about 5, 10 minutes with Sade, then we can have time to have questions for him as well. So Sade, I know Justina just joined us, so could you just tell us about your podcast again? Just briefly.
Uh,
Thank you. Just got the link.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, Sade?
Yes, hi everyone. Apologies
All
for,
right.
can
Thanks
you
for
hear me now? Okay.
yes, we can.
Oh, great. Okay.
All
Right.
right. So thanks Buffy for joining, and thanks Dr. Sade for joining as well. Um
Yeah.
yeah, we have a full house now.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Buffy?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hello. So sorry. Oh my gosh. I got to the computer as fast as I could. My bad.
Hi,
Glad that I'm.
Buffy.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Sad.
So wonderful to see
Hi.
all of you. Yes.
Hi.
All right. So we've done a bit of introductions. I don't know if we should do it again, but probably I'll let Dr. Sade go first to introduce yourself, and Buffy, you can introduce yourself as well. So Dr. Sade.
Okay. Okay. Good evening or good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm based in Mombasa, and it's about 9:15 p.m. I'm a public health specialist, and I was fortunate to be part of the last cohort 2025 for the Thought Leadership Fellowship. I don't know how much you want me to say, Sabath.
Yeah, you could
Huh?
you could tell us a bit about your podcast that
My
you did.
podcast.
Just yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I'm passionate about Muslim health. Basically, in Kenya, we're about 11% Muslims, or the percentage ranges between 11 and 30%. As Muslims, we have some unique um, of, issues in regards to health. One is access, because many of the Muslims are in hard to reach areas. And also being a minority, it's also it's logistical, it's discrimination. But also with our religion, there are certain things that Islamically, we have to be, we prioritize, let's say like modesty, halal products, and many other things, and also some religious practices, maybe are unique about Muslims. So the podcast series was to raise awareness and to advocate for better health access, and also to show that we are also major contributors to the health system in Kenya. Despite being minority, but we play an important role. And also to share lessons from the Islamic medieval ages that we did. Islam and Muslims really played a big role in what is today's modern medicine. So it's different angles, and the podcast is, I've tried to engage different subject matter experts, those who look at, let's say, who understand the historical, the demographics, perspectives of Muslims, the disparities. Also those who are, experts in Sharia, because Sharia is, there are certain things that the modern medicine could benefit by. We've had Sharia banking being very successful compared to secular banking. It has some very pro-people policies that could be applied to the healthcare. Also, the medical education is like, it's becoming too materialistic and commercial. And so by bringing the spirituality and, that you're there to help the human beings to improve mankind. So in the nutshell, that is what the podcast series have aimed at. For more details, please go to muslimsforhealth.com. Yeah, I will share the website here so that you can see that we've already produced about 4 podcasts. There's one that's taken longer, but I mean, it's been a great journey thanks to the wonderful mentorship and support of the BCPH. Without them, I don't think I would even have ever imagined going into this. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sade. I'm sure if you give her 1 hour, she's definitely going to tell you about Muslims health. So thank you,
Yeah.
Dr.
Thank you.
Sade.
Okay.
Buffy.
All right, hello. My name, oh, it gave me a bunch of little balloons. Okay, my name is Buffy Jameson. My pronouns are faith and fairs, pronounced similarly to they, them, theirs, only instead of a th sound, it's a fuss sound. I currently work at a university and the Disability Services office. Let me think. Drake University specifically. What else? Uh, you probably want to know a little bit about my podcast. Let's go with that
Of
because I
course.
could be talking for a long time. So, I was in the 2023, right? Thought, is that where we
2024.
2024? Okay, yes, because we're not in 2020, it is 2026 right now. Time, when you work at a university, time is just weird. It's weird. But at any rate, I was in the 2024 cohort. And my podcast had to do with workplace, um, and viewing it as a public health space, essentially. So I did a lot surrounding mental health in the workplace mostly, and then talking about racism, ableism, and then like the LGBT community, and let me think. I think those were the ones that I focused on primarily. Um, but basically, in mine, I talked about the idea of freedom when it has to do when we are living in a capitalist society, like how is that possible? And then I talked about my own experience um, as a person who is Black, fat, queer, um, and autistic, um, what it looks like to be all of that in the workplace. And I talked about my own experience with discrimination in the workplace. And then I actually brought on a guest speaker who also talked about her experience. We actually experienced this at the same time from the same person. And then for my final podcast, I brought in another speaker and I talked about and I interviewed her about what it is like to be a trans person um, in the oh, I heard a little doorbell. Um, what it's like to be a trans person working in the arts, the performing arts specifically. And really how it relates back to public health, basically, in terms of mental health, in terms of how we treat each other in the workplace, and in terms of trauma-informed practices and how those need to be in place even when we are in the workplace. So basically, a reminder that just because we're going into work doesn't mean that we're leaving absolutely everything behind. In fact, exactly, it's even more so because um, it's where we go every single day and we interact with each other every day. Um, and so we can't pretend as though we are drones every single time we go into the workplace with no emotions, no nothing. We just sit and work because that's not the case. Um, I will leave it there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Buffy. I'm sure some of the fellows are already seeing how their current ideas and topic they want to talk about intersects with the three topics that we've already talked about, from maternal health to Muslims health in terms of access, and Buffy in terms of workplace being places for humans and really not for machines. So great topics. So we'll just go through four different sections in this discussion today in terms of planning and structuring podcasts, some of the tools the past fellows were able to use, and how they were able to even promote their podcasts. And, the last bit of it, how they were able to balance their voices, reflect on everything that they've done. So within the next 15 minutes, we use that to interact. Then we can open the floor for, conversations, questions, and comments. So I would like to stay with you, Buffy. So in terms of planning and structuring your podcast, what was your process like? Just give us those steps, what you did, especially for your first podcast, because we think that's the in chemistry they would say that's the rate limiting reaction. So if that reaction takes place, everything takes place. So what are those steps that you took to ensure that you came up with that first podcast?
Yeah, so um, that was a few different questions. I'm trying to keep them in my head. So, basically, when I was structuring my podcast, first of all, I didn't know that it was going to turn into three podcasts about the same subject. So I originally had a couple of other ideas in place that I was going to do in terms of um, making sure that I hit the five of them, like I was supposed to, but I ended up pausing that one. That's something that I plan on doing later on this year or at the beginning of next year. So I it took a lot of restructuring. I had to go in and make sure that everything fell within the parameters that BCPH had set for us. So because we only had so many minutes, I can't remember the exact amount. I had to
40
split
minutes.
10 minutes. That's what I thought. Yeah, I had to split mine up. To one of my podcasts up into two because it went over by 10 minutes. So I ended up um hand gestures. Oh, okay, computer, fancy. I did the peace sign and so it started talking to me about hand gestures. At any rate, I had to restructure in that way. Um can you put the question in the chat, please? Because I'm having a hard
That's
time.
Yeah, that's fine. So I could reiterate what I'm putting in the chat box. So, what's your process like in terms of, planning your episode from ideation to, when you finally decide on this is good enough, for publishing?
Right. Okay. So I knew that I wanted to do workplace because it wasn't something that a lot of people were talking about. Again, I started off talking about capitalism as a structure, in general, and then I went and made it more personal, because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't too academic-y. I wanted it to be personal stories. And so I wanted to make sure that I was bringing in that element of storytelling, because it's a little bit harder for people to sit there and try to poke holes in it, if it's someone's own story and their own voice, and they're taking their own experiences and putting them out there, right? Especially when we are talking about counter narratives. So those stories that we don't usually hear. And so I knew that I wanted to do that. I knew that I wanted to take some of my own experiences and incorporate them. Like I said, it took a second to figure out how many episodes, breaking it down, all of that. Um, so as far as the script part goes, oh my gosh, that took a while. Um, so for my own, um, it was a little it was a little bit easier, just because I basically just wrote out my own story, and I made sure that I wrote it exactly how I would say it while I was talking. Um, which is a little bit different from something kind of like this, or if I were giving a presentation where you just sort of have bullet points, right? I actually had to write down exactly what I was going to say. And then it took a couple of times recording it. The first time I just sounded really angry, and I was like, I'm not even mad right now. I don't understand. So I had to re-record it because it was strange. And oh my gosh, there was so much that I had to do, and I don't want to take up all of the time talking. But the editing process was a lot. Um, but it was good. Um,
Okay.
and then through to publishing essentially. Um, yeah, it was mostly just the editing afterwards. That took a long time. When I was interviewing people, that part wasn't as difficult because all I had to do was transcribe. I'm gonna leave it there because I feel like I've been talking for a minute. So,
Yeah, thank you so much, Buffy. We know that for different persons, it takes different fits in terms of, you
Mhm.
know, planning. Some persons are very, very structured, and some persons it just flows. So, building on what Buffy just said, Sad, I'm going to come up to you now.
Okay.
How did you decide on that Sad, not Sade, not
Mhm.
Dr. Sade? Yeah.
Okay. Oh, it's
So
sad.
I'm
Okay.
just going to say Ahmed so that we don't confuse
Okay.
the names. So,
Yeah.
Ahmed, now, how did you decide on your podcast format in terms of, you decided to, interview guests, or you wanted to go solo, or just, have that long storytelling? So, how did you decide on that?
Right. Thanks, Sabbath. So for me, when I'd started out, I had almost like 10 ideas that I wanted to explore. But then, of course, with time, that got whittled down to lower and lower. So, in terms of the larger focus of my podcast, also when I was looking at maternal and child health, I wanted to look at a lot of like challenges that aren't talked about as much, and also like solutions and successes. So, for instance, if there are any sort of like low cost solutions that have worked really well, and that might be deployed in resource constrained settings well. So I was looking at those aspects. So for that, I thought what might work best is sort of an interview kind of format, because there were certain experts whose works I was following, and I wanted to learn more about how they went about doing what they did. Because often a lot of interventions might be deployed in a certain setting, and sometimes it makes it to academic papers, they are analyzed, but a lot of like the nitty-gritties of it, how did they go about it, what were the challenges in it, and how did they achieve what they wanted to achieve. Those kind of things were something that I thought wasn't as covered, say in like a lot of conversations in the media. Um, so that's why I sort of went with a podcast, with an interview format. And I had identified a list of experts, like there were people I had anyway wanted to talk for various reasons, and who had done something in their field in terms of like maybe they had done some very interesting studies, or one of the persons, Amrita Mahale, she was leading an AI chatbot for health workers who are working on maternal and child health. And that time it was a fairly new concept in terms of like using AI-enabled chatbots. And there were also a lot of problems with errors. Like, a lot of these LLMs would throw up a lot of errors. And if you're in a very sensitive place where you're looking at how do you, giving vital health information, how do you do that without having any errors? So I wanted to see what their workflow was like, what their process was like. So that's why I went with the interview format. I think for the interview format, we had a bit longer time spans for the recording. So I had like a long conversation with them, got to know more about their work. But then, yeah, I also had to like cut down a lot of those interviews to be within the time limit. Yeah. I hope that answers. Yeah. Thank you, Sabath.
Yeah, thank you, Sad. Thank you, Sad. So building off what Sad said, I'll come to you, Dr. Sade. In terms of
Okay.
preparing your episodes, how did you go about that? Was it scripted? Did you speak freely if you interviewed guests, or did you use bullet
Mm-hmm.
points? What actually worked for you best?
Okay, yeah. First I did my own background learning, because it's a topic that I was very ambitious, right? I wanted to start from historical and then Kenyan population, then, I had like sort of 10 episodes, very ambitious, right? But I was looking at it beyond, right? So after I had read, I did like a PowerPoint of how I would expect the focus of the discussion would be for each episode, right? And then after that is when I would now contact the people I felt would be the ideal speakers. So I would ask within the network who knows this, who knows this, knows. So I'd be connected, and then I would engage them and ask them if they were interested. If they're interested, first step, sign the BCPH media release form. And only then would we then be able to say, okay, now you consent, can we book a schedule, right? And then once they're interested and willing, then I would give them the reference background documents, because yeah, somebody is doing an Ibadah-friendly hospital, but for a talk that we schedule like an hour, I tell them, be prepared to participate for at least an hour. So I'd give them the reference document and also the questions. We agree, let's say we'll discuss the what, why, where, when, how, who, like that. And we'd agree, if I have multiple speakers or a co-host, I ask this and you ask this. That's how we would agree, so that it looks like we're coordinated. Okay. And so, although they would have bullet points, but somehow when people start talking, they get carried away, they get distracted. But generally, our point is, by the end, we should have at least covered this. Yeah. So at least I hope that, so you give them bullets, but allow them to speak freely as well. It becomes more natural as well. Okay.
Yeah, great point. I think what we've just spoken to is you still have to prepare regardless of whom you're inviting or however
Mm.
you're, structuring your podcast. So going to Buffy now. So in terms of, putting together the podcast, definitely there are some tools you work with, some platforms, some software you will use, some application. So what were your top three tools that you used basically when making your podcast? And, why did you choose those tools? Yeah.
So my top tools were definitely Canva for one, because it allows you to go in and structure things the way that you want them to be structured in terms of like the transcripts. And if we're writing a blog at one, like my first one was a blog. And then later on I did podcasting for the Final Four of Final Four. So that, and then there is a voice editing tool that I use. I can't remember specifically what it was called because I'm not gonna lie. I just went through a bunch of free ones, and then there were some that provided like a free um what do you call that? Like a free subscription, like a trial, like a 30-day trial or something like that. And this tool, it was audio editing tools because for whatever reason, especially with that first one, when I was reading it, there was a lot happening in the background and my voice was going in and out. And yeah, there was the whole thing. So I had to use that, and it was super helpful to remove some of that background noise and to enhance my own voice. And then the third one is probably um, the tool that allowed me to go through and edit things out. So I don't know if you noticed, but when I talk, I use the word a lot. I did not realize just how often I used it until I was like, how can I cut this, 13-minute podcast down to 10 minutes, right? And so it took a lot of going through um and cutting out pieces that were long pauses or awkward or unnecessary, right? So like there were some times when we would just in an interview be talking back and forth, and I'm like, we got off topic. We started talking about the Barbie movie, and that doesn't have anything to do with this podcast, right? So let me go through and cut that out, and then that limits some of the time that cuts down on it. So I would say those were the three most. Canva is super helpful. Editing tools that have to do with sound so that you can go in and enhance your voice and all of that if necessary. And then an editing tool that allows you to just actually go through the audio and just cut the pieces that you don't um, actually need or that are unhelpful.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Buffy. Dr. Sade, how about you? What were your own top three tools that you use? Because I know different persons use totally
Mm,
different tools.
yeah. Well, thanks. I agree with Buffy, Canva, but more was Riverside. Yeah. Riverside app for production, as well as well, after production, it would consolidate all the different speaker recordings, and then it could produce like animated reels. Although I mean, it's a really powerful tool, but I got so overwhelmed because I didn't master it. I would send it to a junior film production student who had free time. So then he's the one who saved me because of your timeline. With BCPH timeline is like you have targets, you have deadlines. So I just did not have the luxury of saying I'm going to master Riverside for that period. So I relied more on the film production intern who really saved me that way. But I still intend to master Riverside anyway. I recommend it highly. And I think over time it's getting more friendly, I would say. I don't know. I'm not paid to market Riverside, by the way. Yeah. But yeah, and for me, the LED light, the microphone, I mean, I bought another sound recording device. I invested in it, but when it came on, I just could not use it. So I just had to put it aside. Yeah. So I'd just say don't go overboard right from the beginning. Go slowly when you're purchasing tools. All right.
Great, great nuggets by Dr. Sade.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the timelines can seem so long at the start, but when it gets to actual production, it
Mhm.
shortens, between the blink of an eye. So I'll come
Yeah.
to you, Saad, Ahmed now, so that we don't confuse. So what
Mhm.
were your priorities when editing? Because we know after, recording, the major part of the work now is actually editing what you want to publish. So what were your priorities when editing? Was it, the length, the clarity, the tone? What's that thing you were always looking for, when you're editing the recording?
So when I started editing, I would be looking more at the pacing and tone. But for me initially, it was a lot about the clarity because some of the recordings I had done, the voice quality wasn't great. It was
Mhm.
like peak summer in India. I couldn't use the fan because it was very hot. But still,
Mhm.
sometimes you have neighborhood sounds. It's not a very soundproof kind
That's
of
right.
environment. And even though I was like sweating throughout the recording, there was still like a lot of audio glitches and errors. So I just wanted to make sure that, everything is clear. And one of the podcasts I had done, it was with someone who was also a caregiver. And so they also had like someone coming into the room and there was like other disturbances. And we had really tried to find a time where that wouldn't be a challenge. So we had done like maybe, I think it was 6 a.m. for her. It was also a strange time for me. But still, there were like some minor issues in that. So I think just getting the clarity in that at that time, Adobe Podcast helped a lot, like in terms of removing a lot of the background sounds. But then I also later realized it also removes some of my audio, like, when you're speaking, your highs and your lows, that also gets clipped out. But there was a lot of like clarity that came from that tool. And in terms of length, also, just making like, I mean, apart from the time limit, also making it interesting for someone who might not be part of, like, who might not have as much background knowledge as, say, my guest has on the topic or I might have on the topic. So just making sure that it's comprehensible, it's interesting, it's digestible for someone without being so much information overload and while also telling a story of sorts. Like there is some narrative that's binding it throughout. It's not just like, oh, here are 100 things about this topic that you absolutely should know, which is also what like we could have done because there was so much that I wanted to share. But it's also a matter of like, okay, what is something that you might think is important, but you still have to leave out so that you can tell a more powerful story as opposed to, say, a more complete story in that sense. So there are a lot of different things that keep coming in, like, okay, do you want to keep this question? How much information should you put at this point? So those were some things that I had to like really, when I was doing the edit, just sort of grapple with like, okay, what can I remove? What can I keep? And in terms of the pacing, again, I think like Buffy, I realized, oh, I'm seeing a lot of ums and sort ofs and all. And initially, I just went out like removing all of it. I was like, okay, the time limit will be shorter. But at some point, I also realized that, removing it all makes you sound like a robot. Like you
Mhm.
have to have those pauses, you have to have that reflection, because that also gives the person who's listening it time to absorb. So just having this sort of like really perfect sounding where you're speaking very fluently and there's no pauses, that sounds like a good idea, but sometimes that's not something that I want to work towards. And then I had really gone to the other side where I tried to make it perfect, what I thought was perfect, and then it just sounded so difficult. Like it was such a good conversation, but suddenly it had become this like rant. And then I had to again go back and like check and make sure that it's more human, like the voice is there, the warmth, the pauses, the reflections are all there. And just so that it's easier to understand. Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned
Yeah,
Adobe Podcast was a tool.
Yes, that was the
Adobe
website.
Adobe Suite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
putting in the chat.
any others?
All right.
I'll share it in the chat. Yeah, I think maybe.
Okay.
All right.
Mm.
Thanks, Sad. I think we have access to the Adobe Suite. We'll take questions in about 5 minutes. So I'll come
Mhm.
to you, Buffy, just before we get to the last question. I just wanted to bring this in before we get there. How did you find the right balance between sharing your personal opinion and evidence, especially given the kind of podcast you did, not to come off, authoritative, just finding that balance. How did you do that?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Me,
Buffy?
me, okay. Yeah. So finding that right balance, actually, um, in my master's program, because we focused on social justice within the educational setting, that's something that I had to learn how to do just so that I could get through the program. So actually finding that balance, I mean, it's just, I would say that it's because I read so many papers that did exactly what I was getting ready to do for BCPH. And so because I had read so many stories that were written in that way, I kind of knew, okay, this is a spot where I should provide some backup, right? So it really just, it's kind of difficult to, because my brain is like trying to synthesize like 4 years of information right now. Um, So basically, the spots where you are talking about something that you know other people are going through, that is where it'll be easier for you to find those spots, to find evidence and to find that backup to go along with what you're saying or to go along with what the person you're interviewing is saying, right? So, for example, when I was talking about my own experience, right? I was talking about ableism, racism, all of these different things. I realized and already knew going in that my experience lined up with a lot of women and non-binary people of color, right? And so I knew that I wanted to do research surrounding um, statistics and whatnot on that before I went in and actually talked about my story, so that I could find those themes. So it's about pulling out themes that are similar to what other folks have experienced. And that's when you're able to find those what am I trying to say? When you're citing those resources and those academic um,
Mhm.
pieces that you can put in behind it. I don't know why I'm having a hard time talking today, but I'm gonna leave it there. I think you got it. I think you got it.
Yeah, thanks, Buffy. I'll stay with you with that same question, Dr. Sade, because I
Okay.
know Muslim health in Africa, talking
Mhm.
about that is also a very sensitive topic, especially in
Sure.
societies where you have the Muslims, you have the Christians, dominated society.
Mhm.
So those kind of conversations are really very
Sure.
sensitive. So how did you try to strike that balance, when producing your podcast?
Okay. Okay. When producing my podcast, I just engaged Muslims. All my guest speakers were Muslim. However, they still have different opinions. Like in the historical and demographic perspectives, I had someone who's Muslim but indigenous Kenyan, and we're talking about, let's say, um, the Arab civilization or their contribution to the Kenyan history. So there is where it's like we had differences of opinions. He's saying like it's the indigenous Kenyans who, like brought all the historical developments, like with for Jesus, if you go there, you'll see a lot of like historical artifacts, building forts, you know, the architecture. If you come to the coast, you see a lot of fancy architecture that we know is from Arab, but he's saying no, there's no proof. Yeah, the proof is this one. We believe it is the indigenous Kenyans themselves who, designed the doors and the lovely stuff. And to me, it's like, no, we believe if you go along the coast where the Arabs settled, you'll see evidence. But if you go inland to Kenya, you won't see anything. So, but during the podcast, I let him speak, and then I said, well, this is what we believe. And then I said, anyway, now this is like end of this part. So we took a break. Then I said, okay, now, we are getting sidetracked. The purpose of this podcast is demographics and all. Let's not get caught here. And he agreed. All right. So then we could like continue. All right. But then I saw that, yeah, but I did not say I'm removing that part where he spoke. I feel he has a right to be heard as well. And what he's saying is other people do agree with him anyways. All right. So it can be tricky. And because I may need to invite him to speak on another occasion, I don't want to antagonize him or anything. He's somebody he's very learned, and I would want to engage again. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sade. So, the last question before we open the floor for everyone is, we finished producing our podcast. So, for post-production, I think Candice talked about it yesterday. What strategies, I'm coming to you, Ahmed now, what strategies did you use to promote your podcast and grow your audience, especially, when you started off? So those, tidbits, those tricks, those things that you did that probably we didn't know about to promote your podcast and promote your audience.
Sorry, I was in mute. Thanks, Sabath. Yeah, so we had for our promotions, we had like put it out on 7 or so social media platforms. So that was, of course, one part of the promotions where we are, say, putting it out on YouTube or TikTok, on different platforms. What I also did later was, since Spotify is something that a lot of people use, I also uploaded it on Spotify. And what I see now podcasters do is that they just put it on all possible platforms that you have. Like, I think there's Castbox, there's Riverside, and there are ways you can also just like replicate it simply without going through the whole process of individually uploading it to different platforms as well. So I think just like spreading the surface area in that sense is very useful, but that's also like a very basic part of it. Because I think now a lot of social media is very driven by algorithms, and there are very specific kind of things that work. And usually things like, say, on Twitter now, it's like things that provoke very strong reactions, which leads people to often like rage baiting or things like that. Those kind of things work on certain platforms and maybe not on others. So it's very hard to sort of like now figure out many social media platforms or what might sort of resonate with audiences there, or whether it would even reach audiences in the first place. So what I'd also done was just shared my podcast over, I mean, I was going to say old-fashioned email, like, but yeah, that was like one of the things, just like do more like individual outreach, share it with people who sort of, I think, might know about it, might be interested in the topic, might have something to add. And that was something that was people like, got back, they waited on it, and they had some thoughtful responses. So that was one thing. And I think the good thing with podcasts is also like, especially when, if you've, say, covered a lot of surface area, you have it on different platforms, over time, it sort of adds up. You see like engagement coming in with the topic. It adds up over the years. That was something very interesting for me that, maybe initially like on social media, you might not see much response, but I think if certain things are searchable, if there is interest in the topic, or there might be certain news developments or something might happen in the news cycle, after which, say, your podcast, which you had made earlier, might suddenly become very topical. So I think that's something that one could always use. Like if there's something happening in the news cycle and we have shared something that's related to that, that's always an opportunity to talk about it again, to bring in a discussion, further the discussion perhaps. So those were some things that sort of helped. I wanted to also expand the podcast. I didn't get that time, but yeah, I think what really I found interesting was that there is a certain audience that's coming over time. And I think keeping that in mind, I'm still like hoping I'll get put in the time there and like expand it, bring more episodes, talk to all the people that I wanted to talk to. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sad. I'll come to you, Buffy. How about you? What strategies did you use to, promote and grow your audience?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and like add to what Saad said because he pretty much covered all of it. The only thing that I did not do that I heard him say was the Spotify, first of all. I'm gonna be talking to you because I don't know how to do that. I can listen to Spotify, but I
Mhm.
mean, adding to Spotify, I'm like, how are people doing this? Um, but also, something that I made sure that I did and continue to do. So I'm someone who gives trainings and presentations all the time. I make sure that it is a part of what I have to say about myself. When I'm giving an introduction in the beginning, and then it's also, so it kind of sandwich things. It's also at the end where it's like, here's the name of the podcast, here's where you can find it, here's where you can listen to it. And then also when I'm just in conversations with individual people, and if we happen to hit on the subject, which we tend to usually because it has to do with the workplace, right? I'm like, hey, by the way, I do have a podcast. If you want to listen to it, you can check it out here. And yeah, you're asking me about that story. And instead of sitting here and telling you that entire traumatic story over lunch and coffee, how about you just go to this podcast and you listen to it? Yeah. So that's a another strategy that tends to work well.
Okay.
Thank you, Buffy. How about you, Dr. Sade? Because I know your audience is really specific. So how did you promote your
Exactly.
podcast to your audience?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. You're right. So I'm targeting the Muslim Professional Network. All right. Um, my social media with Muslim audiences. I'm hoping like family, friends, websites. I'm targeting like websites of like the Federation of Islamic Medical Association. I'm trying to also identify other podcasters who are Muslims and talking about Muslim health. I hope if I can link up with them and like their podcasts and hope I can somehow create links with them. But mine is still very young. I mean, Buffy and Saad, I think they're 2 years ahead of me. So I'm just launching my website. I was determined to get like 5 episodes before I would launch. So I just did it like yesterday in preparation for this, so that at least I can say I've done it. Okay. So I
You,
appreciate any feedback and anybody who can help to further advance the audience will be appreciated. But I'm being careful because first let me get the Muslim support before I venture to like my alumni, medical school alumni and all that, who I know will be positive. But it's the LinkedIn and Twitter and all where I'm still like hesitant a bit. I don't know what you advise. Thank
great, great. Thank you, Buffy. Thank you,
you.
Sad. Thank you, Dr. Sade. Yeah, I have
Mhm,
so many questions in terms of challenges, and I'll allow us to ask those questions. So we have about
mhm,
15
mhm.
minutes to ask Buffy, Sad, and Sade whatever we need to ask. Then we can
Okay,
close up. So the floor is open. You could raise up your
okay,
hands and would
okay.
recognize you.
All right. Okay, let me go first. My biggest challenge was like internet connectivity. You know,
Okay.
there's one episode where four of us, and every 5 minutes someone would drop off. Someone would drop off. So by the end of the recording, I had split it into three. Um, only two got recorded, part one and part three. And part two, I forgot to press the record button. So then now I have to make part one and part three like logical and like it looks like, okay, it's something planned and that it's a complete episode. So I would say I have a backup audio digital recording, if you're doing like video, because then I've had to also, those that are video initially planned, the two speakers had the wrong light, one light facing on the head completely, and one had this cloth hanger right next to him. And I tried with Dr. Sasi to help me to rescue this thing, but in the end, we just had to convert them all to audio. So, I mean, it's something, work in progress, and great learning experience.
Yeah,
So,
thanks.
mhm,
Thanks, Dr.
yeah.
Sade. So, Paula, Abiola, Dalia, Josephina, if you have any questions, the floor is open.
Is it okay if we hear more
Questions, comments.
challenges?
Mhm.
Is it okay if we hear the challenges from Saad and Buffy before we ask questions?
Yeah, sure. Buffy, do you want to go ahead? The most challenge you faced and how you overcame it.
Yeah, so I'm sure that y'all still remember this. My computer just completely died on me
Mhm.
the first week that we started. And I had even bought like a little, actually, yeah, it's still right here. I still haven't used it because I went with like the cheap microphone. It's kind of hard to see with the whatever. But I went with this microphone because it's like USB connector. And I went with that one because it was cheaper. I didn't go with the Bluetooth, but then I regretted it instantly because I still haven't used it. It's still just in the box. But because my computer died completely, I had to get super, super creative. I started using my iPad, which again is why I was having the trouble with the audio. Like seriously, I that first podcast, or the first thing that I did, the blog with the, reading it and everything. Um, no, it wasn't even the blog. It was the introduction video. The first time that I did it, like it was just awful. I think that, Cersei can probably talk a little bit about how awful it was. I really had to go in and use any and every tool that I could find audio wise to get rid of that background noise and to enhance my own voice without sounding like Minnie Mouse because, sometimes the audio does stuff like that. So yeah, that's mm, that was something. That was something. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Buffy. How about you, Sad?
Yeah, I think all of these challenges I've also been through, and we used to discuss this every week, and we'd be like, "Oh, you won't believe what happened last week."
Mhm.
But I think for me, starting, it was just getting time of the people I wanted to record with. So just in terms of the timelines, it took like I started very early, even as before we even had this sessions. But just back and forth, it took like forever to get their time. And of course, everyone's busy and they're from very different time zones. So just that part. And then, of course, some people also didn't respond or like responded quite late. So that was one of the things. Then for me, the audio clarity, that was another thing, which now when I look back, I think as far as possible, I would have tried to make sure that the recording is clear. Maybe go to a quieter place, if a friend's house, if I could have gone. Just make sure that the recording itself is as good because you can always do some correction in post while editing. But if your recording is good, then that's not necessary, and the quality is always better that way. So that was one of the big challenges that I had. And in terms of the edits, just making sure while recording also, just making sure that I'm not getting too technical or getting into details that might not be easy to understand. And if I am just explaining that and contextualizing it for everyone, like, okay, this is what this person does, or this is what we are talking about, or why this is even important to talk about. That was some of the things. And I think during the final edit, just getting a hang of the software and getting a hang of versions, archiving the versions properly, keeping backups all the time, because I was also terrified of laptops just, crashing, hard drives crashing. So I had like a cloud backup, I had a hard drive backup and one in my computer. So Touchwood, like that helped, just having different backups and having the versions named properly so that if there was any problem, I could always access a different version of it. Yeah,
Mm.
thank you.
Great, great. Thank you. The three of you, I'm sure we are learning from the the challenges they had. We were there as well, and we saw the challenges, and it's
Mhm.
good to,
Mm.
see the progress in the end. They're able to, complete their episode. So, we'll open the floor again for questions and comments within the next 9, 10 minutes. Paula?
I need one more minute, but I'll come
Okay.
back here with some questions, I promise.
All right.
Do you mind if I ask a question so everyone can incubate? Is that okay?
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so so from all of our previous fellows, was there anything during the process that surprised you, either like in a positive way or in a negative way that we haven't talked about?
Mm. Dr. Sade?
Mm. I think for me, the whole thing was a surprise. Yeah, everything. Yeah, but pleasant. Yeah, and at the end, you feel good, right? But I think at least to the people I've sent to, they're sending like thumbs up, but before they've even listened, that for me surprised. I need constructive feedback. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Sade.
So here's
Buffy?
one. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Sad, you wanted to say something?
Uh, yeah, I think for me it was just how all the guests that I had, like just how passionate they were about the topics that they had and how willing they were. I mean, the passion, of course, wasn't a surprise, but just how willing they were to share what they knew and share it with audiences that might not be the people that they usually kind of talk to or interact within their milieu. So just that willingness to sort of like, come on a podcast, share the knowledge, have a conversation, and being very open to it, being very welcoming to it, that was a very good surprise for me.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you, Sad. Dr. Cersei, you wanted to say something?
You're
I think
muted.
you're muted.
Oh, I thought I unmuted myself. I was just wondering with our guests today if there was something they could do differently, or perhaps if they were to do it again, would they explore the same topic, um, take the same approach? What would they do differently or do the same?
I would learn
Buffy would.
Riverside first. I would learn editing first because my dream is to do it myself. The level of effort of the back and forth working with somebody else, uh, I would recommend learn video editing as soon as possible, and any of the tools. I saw you have this Camtasia. I don't know what it's about, but is it new tools that came up after we graduated? Yeah. So I want to
They
learn.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
Tools are always things have really evolved. I remember Dr. Carpenter and I met with a firm a number of years ago that wanted to charge an exorbitant amount of money to go through our video content and make short clips. And
Mhm.
now there are tools online that'll do it for you in about 10
Wow.
minutes on its own.
Wow.
So it's a whole new ball game. Some of these things get more expensive and some things get,
Mhm.
the new guys on the market are a lot leaner, faster, and very
Okay.
cost effective.
Okay. Wow.
But yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Cersei. Paula?
Thank you, Sabath. I have a couple questions, but I think I'll start with my top two.
Mhm.
Okay.
How did you measure success when you were both in the fellowship and then post fellowship? What did success look like for you in terms of your podcast? And I'll start with that one first.
All right, great. I think I'll go over to
Mm.
Buffy, if you could, respond to that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So success in terms of like in the beginning with like just doing the podcast came from, I mean, whenever I would get a huge step of it done, honestly, that was a celebration moment for me. So the editing, once I got that done, yay. The actual writing pieces, like each step was a success, really.
Mhm.
And then in terms of continuing to measure success now, really everything that I wrote about and interviewed about, I mean, it's still topical now. So success is really going to be about measuring, like, okay, my next iteration of it. So well, not even if, I'm going to repost it because you want to keep reposting stuff, kind of like what Saad said, especially as things come up. Um, topically, within the larger conversation that we're having around the world or within our own communities, right? And so really measuring success is just about, okay, how many more people have listened? How many more folks have I reached this time around? And then remembering that it's not over, like it doesn't have to be over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Sade,
Thank you.
you wanted to say something?
Okay. Yeah. For me, as Buffy said, just securing that person's consent. It's a moving goalpost to say, okay, I agree on this date and that it actually happens. Because there are those who the day before is like, sorry, sorry. So when the recording is completed, for me, I'm like, yeah, and then of course you're just beginning. And then it's like then it takes like a month or at least a month to two to edit before it's final. But to me, until I got like four, then I say now I can put it on the website and also developing the website. For me, that has also taken a lot of time. I wanted just the content on the website also to be informative, a learning experience, not just posting things. So I think I'm happy that a year later I have something that I committed to do to BCPH, but now it's to link up with BCPH, make sure even your logos appear. And when BCPH advertises my website, that will be the best success. But it's a journey I intend to continue with. It's something I love doing and it's learning, and I think there are others who have seen the website and they're like, yes, let's do part two. Okay, that's success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sade. Sad, you can go ahead.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add to what Buffy and Dr. Sadi said, like in terms of all these metrics of success. And one of the things for me that was very interesting and more long term, like I didn't realize immediately after I finished the fellowship, was also in terms of what all I could do now. Like, making some sort of creative, having a certain sort of design sensibility, or for instance, right now I started working on a website. And now when I look back, is thinking of all the new things that I had done during the fellowship, it made me do so many more other new things. So I thought that was very interesting and how it panned out over the long term.
Great, great,
Yeah.
great. Success means different things to different people. Paula, your second question.
Thank you. It kind of falls in line with what Saad said. I wanted to know if you did creating the podcast open up any unexpected opportunities for anyone in the group, speaking, collaborations, any partnerships, anything that came out of this experience for you?
Yeah, I think Sad could speak to that right away. Sad.
Mhm.
Yeah, in terms of like collaborations and all, I don't know if the podcast directly led to that. There's no like somebody reached out to me, oh, this is something that you've done, or do you want to like do another podcast on this? But I do feel like I've had responses, and while I might not be able to join the links back to it, but I do think like larger, it is something that people have looked at, and that might have been a determining factor in, say, something happening or some sort of like collaboration going ahead. So basically, what I'm saying is that I don't have like evidence for it, like a causation link, but I'm pretty sure now, especially the things I've heard, it has played some role in it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Sad. Dr. Sade, you're smiling. I feel like you have something to say about that.
Yes. Yeah, no, because we did one episode on the Ibadah Friendly Hospital. Then now, and then we also talked about augmenting medical education with bioethics, Islamic bioethics. We're planning like a trip to Islamic University of Uganda because they already have like a curricula for nurses to teach them on that concept. So we hope that we can go there, learn, and adapt to be able to roll out one day in Kenya. And here in Mombasa, that Ibadah Friendly Hospital is under construction. So I hope we'll be able to train the manpower to be able to implement it as envisioned, right? So it's still something that we hope by next year we'll have something. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sade. I'm just looking at our time as well. So we'll take question from Josephina. We have about less than 10 minutes. Josephina, go ahead.
Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. It's so helpful to hear, especially hearing how you balance kind of academic framework or discourse with personal experiences. And I'm curious to hear how you prepare your guests to discuss their personal experience, especially with more sensitive topics. Like, what did that preparation look like for you to make sure that people feel comfortable talking to a public audience on your podcast?
All right, thanks, Josephina. I don't know if we got the question. So she's saying if how do we prep our interviewees to sort of come to our podcast and talk about those sensitive topics. So I don't know. I think Dr. Sade, you might have some nuggets for us.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I did a lot of learning, background reading, and trying to identify relevant reference material. And I try to equip the speakers, and also prior to recording, we agree this is what we shall discuss, and so that they are more confident. I remember, because Sharia compliance in healthcare is a very new concept. We have Sharia compliant banking, finance sector. So the same people who are doing the finance and halal certification, for them, the health aspect was actually very foreign, right? So we had to discuss prior to the recording. And during the recording, actually, they were learning as we went on. And by the end, they agreed that this is actually a very important topic.
Great. I don't know, Sade, if you would have anything to contribute to that quickly.
And you mean Ahmed?
Yeah, Ahmed.
Um, Sorry, actually, for my was more interview based where people were talking about their work and their experiences. So maybe I think I can skip this one. Yeah, probably.
All right, no problems. Dalia, your question.
Sorry. Thank you all first for, speaking to us. I know I came on late, so I apologize. But were there any moments when you struggled to keep up with the fellowship deadlines, and how did you handle that if you did?
All right. I
Could go
think
with that one.
yeah, Sad, you can go with it.
So the answer was every day or every week. We had it was quite difficult. Like, once it started, it just really built a cadence, and you had so many deadlines, one after the other. So that was really a challenge, like in terms of everything, the promotions, just getting the podcast out. And I think what helped in that aspect was just starting some of the most difficult pieces very early on. So if, like, say there's a tool I wasn't comfortable with, just making sure I've gotten comfortable with it so that that doesn't like affect any other deadlines. Reaching out to people, that was also something that I was expecting would take time, but it took even longer than I was expecting. And I think for our cohort, that was always a challenge, like, with the deadlines, and we had so many ideas, we wanted to try so many things. I thought, we had to do 5 blogs or podcasts. I started out with I wanted to do 10. And of course, then you get a reality check as you're working on it. But just, yeah, it's always a struggle. But also, I think like there are various reasons. Sometimes like a computer crashes, like what Buffy said, there's certain very unpredictable things that happen. And of course, then you might not be able to meet the deadline. But just having some sort of like checks, balances, trying to factor in those delays, having backups sort of helps with that. Um, but still, we were like really behind on the deadlines at times. So it was often a struggle just maintaining that with everything going on.
Great, great. Thank you, Sad. And we've learned our lessons too as the steering committee. We've reduced the number of podcasts we have to produce this time to 3 based on feedback and
Wow.
seeing the commitments and time required. We try to see as much
Mm,
as possible to ensure that
yeah.
everyone has ample time to produce their podcast. So we have about 3 minutes left. I've
Yeah.
not heard Abiola today. I don't know if he has any comments, not necessarily a question. What do you think about, the experiences that has been shared so far by, everyone?
Okay. Um, yes, I want to appreciate everyone, the experiences you have shared. I actually have a question. I was trying to raise my hand, so I don't know if I can go ahead to ask the question.
Yeah, you can go
Anybody
ahead.
can
Yeah,
answer.
please.
I just want to know what extra creative touch. There are millions of podcasts out there. Everybody's waking up. You just wake up in the morning. There's a new podcast on the internet. And because you have access to your phone, somebody can just wake up in the morning and say, "Okay, I have decided to start a podcast." So
Mhm.
I want to know the extra creative touch you put into yours to make it different from the regulars, so that you won't be part of the statistics of podcasts that started and failed. You know. So
Mhm.
I would like to know what is that extra creative touch you put just to you. I mean, something you were intentional about. There are general things to do about a podcast, but you were intentional about this thing, knowing that it will make mine, different from every other podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Abiola. I think I'll go with Buffy to start off this. Buffy?
Okay, so basically, what you're asking is ask one more time, but like with one sentence.
Okay.
What's something
Um,
unique about your podcast? Just to summarize, what's
Thank
that
you.
unique thing
and
that
you were
this is
you were
me? Yeah,
intentional about it.
yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, what I was intentional about in terms of uniqueness, was definitely, I mean, I think that's part of why I chose the storytelling uh sort of thing, or theme, for my podcast, because automatically that makes it unique, because you're talking about someone else's experience, right? And it's, it's usually something that, I mean, you're sitting and you're listening to a story, right? But then also you're being challenged to think about things and to think about what you are doing, what you have experienced, and what you plan on doing later on, right? Because of what you've just witnessed or because of what you've just learned. So in terms of trying to make it unique, I honestly, I think that storytelling, like it's just usually it's automatically rather unique. Um, oh, yes, all of what Dr. Carpenter said as well. Um, but also in terms of uniqueness, I guess I would say like my logo. So like People Prevail Over Profit is the name of my podcast, and I made it like a little word puzzle. So I put People Prevail and then I put a line and then I put profit. So I mean you'd have to be kind of geeky like me to notice it, but I mean that was something else that I did.
Okay.
Yeah, just to
Mm.
just to add on to what Buffy said, because I listened to uh the podcast. I think it's the pace and the tone of voice for me for your podcast, Buffy. I think it was really great. It's storytelling, but I think the pace at which you went about it and the tone of voice you used, that stood out for me as well. So just wanted to mention that. So I'll come to you, Dr. Sade. What's that unique thing about your
Okay.
own podcast that you intentionally infused?
Okay. Okay. I'd say getting, expert Muslim professionals, that the ones I've started with all have PhDs, for example. So they're very learned, all right? And just as well as a beautiful website, right? That it's not just podcasts, recordings, but I've tried to make it attractive, and I hope you all agree. My logo as well is that it's about Kenya. So I'm hoping Kenyans, when they see that it's Muslim Health, but Kenya, that's something very unique and untalked about. So I would say those three things to begin with are intentionally designed. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Sade. I don't know if Sad wants to add.
Yeah, I think to the larger question, there are still not a lot of podcasts about public health and certain public health topics. Of course, we have a lot of podcasts that keep coming out, but I think there are certain conversations that could really use a lot more airtime, a lot more discussion. And wherever, people's lived experiences are unique. And whenever your lived experiences are weaved into the podcast, it's always something that's unique, even when the format of the podcast is very old. So, for instance, what Buffy had done with Fair, unique experiences, lived experiences, I really loved that. Even those 10-minute snippets, they were just so interesting for me. Or now, when I'm hearing Dr. Sade talking about her podcast, it's something that I've never heard of, like, something so, in the Kenyan context, hearing about the Muslim minority, their experiences, or something, even like construction. I just want to, like, as soon as I shut down my computer, like, listen to the podcast. It's that
Thank you.
interesting. So I think all of us have such interesting stories and backgrounds. There's always scope for uniqueness. And whatever we will be putting out, there's a good chance others haven't. And if they have, then I'm sure we can always have 10 more ideas to do that.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Sad. Thank you, Aviola, for that question as well. So thanks, everyone. I think we've come to the end of the interesting, you know, panel session we just had. So thank you, Buffy, and thank you, Dr. Sade. Of course,